life expanding its own heart of its own bell curve continued from last week. If you recall, when I drew the good old ordinary bell curve and pointed out to you that in a sense, a quite real sense, to use this one diagram, life continues up here to make another little bell curve. It is like the pressure point at which life is expanding. A few things I mentioned I wanted to bring a little closer to the surface. The description I was using in the two and the three-dimensional world is that in this bell curve situation, life is raising and expanding the mainstream, that everything becomes more and more homogenized. Now here's the tricky part. It would not be tricky if this was ordinary. This would not be tricky if indeed we were a religion. It wouldn't be tricky if I could lower my four-dimensional IQ by 70 or 80 points without doing myself real damage, without taking me to the point that I would no longer understand green acres and such as that. So I don't want to run the risk of doing that kind of cerebral surgery on myself, although I know how. All right, here's the hard part to put into words, is that everyone attempting this, from people attempting it at a very low level of attempting to follow some religion once a month, once a year, to people attempting to do this, a large part of their energy seems to be devoted to this, is that you have to, the same way that life does, is take the extremes and begin to bring them into the mainstream. Your extremes, which is the message, if you can hear it, of all organized religion, all forms of life's evolutionary process that finds a voice. Everything it talks about, from thou shalt not kill to thou shalt not steal to thou shalt not do almost anything, is an attempt to, on the individual level, and of course, as always, on the mass level of humanity as a complete organism, but is to bring in the individual, especially the few that are the active participants in life's increasing attempt to homogenize and to increase its own evolution, its own understanding. But in those individuals, you've got to find your own extremes. The words are easy enough to come up with. I could ask you people what your extremes are, and everyone would write down, and it'd come out things such as, I am lazy, I am very greedy, I bet I have it hid, but boy, you don't know. I would probably steal gold teeth out of a dead man's mouth if a priest wasn't looking. And I can't help it. I am fearful, I am whatever. All of you would have at least two good ones. From some area of extremes on that bell curve, you'd all have at least two that you'd say, all right, I've got two extremes. I've got things that there's just no doubt about that I need to straighten up. I need to straighten out. All right, here's the hard part, is you have got to take your own extremes, the ones that you were born with, the ones that you find yourself with. You're born with them, but those of you still wrestling with nature and nurture, you must take those extremes and you must bring them into the mainstream, comma, and then you must develop new extremes. That's the part that's left out of all teachings that filter down for the many. Because for one thing, you got your choice. It doesn't make sense. It's self-defeating. I guess that about covers it, doesn't it? But you've got to. Either that or you would have been converted to some form of new religion. I guess we'd have to call it blandism. Of course, you would be doing the very thing that I was touching on last time, if you indeed could become a diamond from being this heretofore old chunk of coal, and you could clean up all of your extremes. That appears to be, verbally, the intent of all religions. That is a prime message. That is a mainstream message that has gone through man from life. Because imagine, if indeed you are the world's greatest, by consensus opinion, the world's greatest living Jew, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, what would you be? Just from a kind of a casual viewpoint, which you can't discount casual viewpoints. If you were one, I suggest to you that you'd be the death of the party. That if indeed a Jesus lived by what they call his teachings now, that man would have been probably one of those Sunday afternoon schlock shows they throw together of all-star boring events. And they'd bring him on, and the man would have no competition. If you change, I should add, to anybody working up a sweat, if you can go off in a slightly right angle direction into another dimension, it's not just funny. There is real validity to that. But if you cleaned up all of your extremes and brought them into the mainstream in this lifetime, that would not be sufficient. You then must develop your own new extremes. This is where some of these so-called mystical teachings and some things that some of you people picked up, that life is scattered here and there, about coming up with superhuman efforts or people doing new and unusual things, that is the germination of those ideas. There is a reality to making a kind of extraordinary effort, and by that I started to say superhuman, but all these terms have been used so much, people then, ordinary people, ordinary consciousness would believe superhuman effort to be like praying 25 hours a day. It would be like fasting for 7 years nonstop, and that sort of thing. Whereas superhuman effort is closer to such as this. An example I've used before, and I didn't follow up, I suggested to you people, take it on a very basic level, a red circuit level, that you have taken up some form of exercise, that you have taken up swimming, and you now swim. It took you 6 or 8 months, let's say, and you now jump in a pool and you swim a mile non-stop. And you feel now, it's been going on, let's say, for months, or maybe a couple of years. It still takes a certain kind of effort for you to do it. You get through and you feel good and tired. You got now the point you can look up at the clock when you dive in the pool. By the time you get out, you can right now predict, probably in less than 60 seconds, how long it's going to take. In other words, you got this tempo going. You come out and you have a certain kind of refreshed tiredness. And the way I presented this to you once is those of you that stumbled across this and had no words for it, and for those who didn't, I put words on it and described it, is to increase your effort, that you feel as though, if you then examine what your yellow circuit would be saying to you, that I am doing this now at the speed at which I can operate. A mile is about all I could do. I guess I could do a couple of more laps, but a mile is about it. And I've got it down to where it is now 49 minutes. But you can change what seems to be the kind of energy expended by doing that which would seem to be the opposite of a sane approach to this. That is, go about it harder, try and swim faster. And you don't get more tired, you get less tired. But you have to increase the effort. Now that is closer to superhuman effort. That is closer to extraordinary effort. A little bit above a red circuit level would be to undertake, which I'm not going to stop and try and describe and defend and talk people into. I've used it enough, and enough of you got some sensation of the reality of this, that you come up with something. Like I'll go back and I'll study mathematics because I always hated math. Not only hated it, I'm terrible at it. Right now, it's all I can do to fool my check balance monthly. Is to go back, go to night school, if you must, which is probably the best start rather than trying to do it on your own. But start studying math on the basis that I'm going to become proficient at math to the point I could, let us say, pick up the LSAT study guide, these books they used to sell that give you examples of upcoming or past LST, and you go through the math portion and you understand it. It might take you 2 years. It might take you 2 months once you got past the genetic resistance to it. But that is closer to a profitable, extraordinary effort than attempting to pray 25 hours a day. It has to be new extremes for you. Now, I could make new extremes. And to some of you it was extremes when I said to be personally and consistently involved with this, that you must get at least 45 minutes of exercise a day. Some of you physically could not. Some of you physically said you could not, which is a different class. Some of you physically thought you could not, which is another class. But it seemed to be just across the board. I mean, saying you can't drink or do drugs and do this. But I also told you that just giving up alcohol, giving up drugs, starting to get exercise was not going to create some extraordinary moment of epiphany. It was not going to ignite your little brain cells, but it sets up a necessary background. Conversely, you cannot lay around and become a wallet or a potato. You cannot drink every day and take drugs and do this. It takes a cost out of the blood. It takes another cost that I've never tried to describe to you out of the nervous system itself. Just look at anybody that's a drunk. Somebody that drinks constantly. You're able to be able to get a sensation of it now, not morally, but it takes a toll on the nervous system, and eventually it takes a permanent toll. But all so-called or apparent widespread standards, whether they be from me or somebody else, eventually have their limitations. And they specifically do not cause some extraordinary experience for everybody. Some of them do not, within themselves, create an extraordinary experience for anybody. What I am talking about, some of you have already begun to experience. Most of you worry about it more than it deserved, and I attempted to hint that to you. That is, some of you already feeling that you have changed so much and that you now understand so much in areas wherein previously you understood naught, that now you almost have life whipped. And by and large, life now is a drag, unless, of course, they are re-showing Green Acres in your local TV market. Most of you that have ever thought you had those worries, you are worrying in advance. But it is based on reality. That the more you bring in your extremes in this grand old bell curve drawing, the more you bring the extremes into your mainstream, they cease to be extremes. Or as your forefathers and your foreconsciousness would say, things that seem to be sinful, things that, even if you weren't religious, that seem to be morally reprehensible. Or if you were just psychologically wired up, that you felt there are habits I have that I should break, I should change the way in which I live because it would make me a better person. All right, all of that doesn't matter by whose definition. It does not matter apparently what external standard is used or what words are used. These are all in the realm that I'm describing to you as being your extremes. Everyone is attempting to become homogenized because life is. Life attempts to continually pull its skirt down, tighten up its garters, tries to fix up its face. It continually attempts to look around at everything that constitutes itself. And by all extremes, nationalities, races, religions, you should be able to feel this by now. Throughout the history of man, it's like this arduous process. Within life's body of it keeps taking Jews and Christians and Muslims, for one instance, and it keeps taking those molecules, those humans that seem to make up those aforementioned groups, and it keeps taking them and pushing them together like, won't you people all get here in a room together and see what happens? Of course, more or less what happens is they kill each other. Not completely, of course, or we wouldn't have any Christians or Jews or Muslims. But when you open the door, there sure are a lot of dead bodies. And there sure is a whole bunch of suffering and people hollering, what's going to happen to us? We're going to kill ourselves, and the gods will hate us for doing this. The gods are the one that threw you all in the closet. If it's hurting the gods, they're hurting themselves. But you must see, they continue to do it. Life continues to take different groups of people, nationalities, nations. Of course, this attempt has been called by humanity, what's that word? Starts with a war. It starts with a W. Nobody can see what war is. But one description, a quite valid description, is it takes people of different colors, different speech patterns. It takes different parts of his body and it says, hey, let's you and him get together. Not what you thought I was going to say, but hey, let's see you and him fight. That's the way it comes out. But notice this, every time this does happen, and they throw together two diverse groups, they go at it, they kill a bunch of each country, each groups. Many of their people get killed, but what happens when it's over? A whole bunch of them intermarry. After the fight is always a good fuck. And it ends up that you don't just have the people of Kingdom X and Kingdom Y. As long as they fight, after every fight, the X people are going to become a little more Y-ish, and the Y people are going to become a little more X-ish. It's right there in front of people, and they don't see it, that something is going on. Life is continuing to drag these extremes within its own consciousness, and it keeps bringing them together, and they do not fit immediately. Should be obvious. But that is what is going on. That is what is going on with people attempting, apparently on an individual level, to be religious, to clean up their act, to eradicate all of their little flaws and become a pure, flashing diamond Christian, awakened Sufi. But it's not enough, because then you've got to develop your own extremes. And many of you should be doing that already. Many of the tasks I have given individually, many of them I gave out in general just to do once or twice or to do for a week. Some of you should have picked up. All of you should easily pick up. This is kindergarten time for me insisting that if it's humanly possible, you have got to exercise constantly and enough that it requires effort. If you came into this and I said, all right, everybody, for instance, I said, everybody has to run 3 miles a day, and you're all running 3 miles a day, if there was anything to you, you should have known immediately. Not having to tell me or to hide the fact, you should start running 6. But all of you should have some notion by now that if you're up to the point that you can run twice what you used to, and this is just a very crude level. And forget about finally having some mystical experience while in the midst of flying down the street in your teeny boppers and your shorts. But it creates the right kind of background. This is just the minimal kind of background. Just the same way as feeding your body enough to stay alive is you should be getting exercise, but you should constantly be pushing it. There should be effort on a daily basis, whether it be that or be something apparently that you're trying to do differently in the yellow circuit, like study math. You're attempting to take up some artistic hobby. And by hobby, most of you I think know by now, oftentimes I mean that in a very serious sense. But whatever it is that you are attempting to do, it should be on the basis that there is a daily awareness of the effort this takes. And with the right people, which we'll assume you are to be here, and then to do this, it's past the point very quickly that it's some sort of burden. It's not simply, well, boy, I hate to get up this morning and run again. It may be cold, it may be raining, and you might prefer to stay in bed. The only thing we can refer The only thing we say about that is you're human. But you should quickly see that it is not a kind of continual burden that you go to bed at night and the last thing you think about, or you lay there for 20 minutes before you go to sleep every night thinking, oh my God, I got to get up and run again. That was okay to do if you didn't run in here, get exercise before you came here. That was all right for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And it should not be, if you did go back and sign up for math classes at night, it's not a matter of you worrying every Tuesday and Wednesday about your night classes on Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday and Thursday on your night class on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that you're sitting around worrying about it like it's high school, redone, revisited, that you haven't done your homework. It's none of that. But this serves a very positive purpose for the few, that whatever it is you're doing, it's got to require enough effort. You've got to keep pushing the boundaries of what you're doing, pushing the path that you have taken, studying math, running, swimming, trying to take up painting. You must constantly, once you reach a certain point, just by your standard, you've got to push it further so that there is a daily awareness that something I do requires effort. And it's not your phony baloney job, most of you. It's not the fact, well, I got to get up and go make a paycheck. I mean, that's what your forefathers and foremothers got for fucking around with God. So you just got to accept that unless you can find a way out, and I'm on the favor of it if you can. But forget about that stuff. That's not effort. That's an extreme of being alive. It's got to be something that you have done. And whether I got you started or not, but it's got to be something that you do. And then there needs to be this daily awareness. Again, I say it's not a burden, it's not a dark shadow hanging in your head going, oh, later I got to do so-and-so. If that's it, you're on the wrong track. Absolutely. But it needs to be something going on so that there is a daily awareness that there is something that you're doing that requires effort. Not getting up and going to work. Not visiting your family twice a year. Nothing that you would have done ordinarily. It has to be something that you have specifically started to develop as your own extreme. Without that, you tread water. You can get to a certain point, but you will just stay there. And then you begin to write me notes. You begin to have little bland faces at times. And I look at you and you're back taking a nap. You've got the alarm clock hidden in your underwear. And you have a little smile. You're not making that kind of rudimentary background effort that should be going on daily, or there should be a daily awareness of it. Everybody can have an off day. That's one thing I like about religions. If you're out swimming 2 or 3 miles a day or running 25 miles a day, by God, take Sunday off. In case I never made that clear. Moses and everybody else did, I assure you that. You take it off. Now try this. Everyone, I ask rhetorically, is aware that attacks on governing bodies is not a new phenomenon in the drama of human existence. Almost any non-fiction, political affairs, general readership magazine, newspaper you pick up today, any commentary on through the media of any kind, letters to the editor, conversations in bars, is loaded with complaints about the bureaucracy of governing bodies. Let's take government as being one governing body. There are others, religion, family. Let me start off with a nice example that everyone can surely see quite quickly. It is not just a contemporary phenomenon, it's back as far as recorded history. People writing satires against the befuddled, bewildering, inefficient bureaucracy of the Grecian Senate all the way to our Congress, all the way down to municipalities. Papers are full of stories of wasted monies, of programs being put together to help one group of people. And they set aside and they vote X amount of millions of dollars to help these people, and they find out 10 years later, somebody gets around to saying, let's look into it, and they found out not 1 cent has gone to the people it went to. It's been startup costs going on for 10 years with everybody's brother-in-law on the payroll. Then somebody makes a joke about it. Somebody writes a satirical Broadway review over this matter. The papers, across from the, or in the op-ed section, are loaded for days or weeks. Outraged citizens denouncing this kind of foolishness. That every time the government fucks with something, it gets out of hand. They waste money. It's a system gone awry. All right, everyone knows that. You hear it all the time. You're faced with it to go down and get a new driver's license. You're faced with it if the IRS wants to talk to you about your return. You go down and try to get a license to open up a business. And you feel like you're drowning in inefficiency, right? All right, governing bodies. I would suggest to you that 3 prime examples, and I'm not going to really go any further, would be government, family, and religion. And religion has played the same kind of part as, in a sense, political bodies have played. It's just not recognized as such. And family. Whatever your family situation was, I'm speaking about the genetic wired-in pattern, even if you grew up as an orphan, even if you grew up raised by a maiden aunt. There was a sense somewhere of a family, of a governing body, whether it was just the people running the orphanage, that there was somebody, even if it was a father you never saw, you imagined your father, about what he would do if he were here. At any rate, the family is a governing body. The concept of somebody being in charge, a father, a mother, of somebody saying yes and no. All right. The continual cry. I assume that, can I assume that you were able to make the jump from my political examples into family? Surely you do. Everybody complains about family. If it wasn't for that, in one sense, we wouldn't have psychology, wouldn't have psychiatry. Everybody complains about the behavior of their neighbors. If it wasn't for that, in a sense, we would have no religion. So there is this feeling all across the board, wired into everybody, that things are not working in the most efficient manner, to say the least. And oftentimes, such as in psychological dramas, and I don't mean on the big wide screen either, in ordinary life, it is looked upon as, I am in the terrible psychic shape I'm in now because of the inefficiency of my family. They might as well have been civil servants, bureaucrats, the way they treated me. I couldn't get attention. I couldn't be taken seriously. I'd go to them with problems and they'd say, take a number. I'd try to ask them for advice and they'd say, fill out the request in triplicate and mail it to me. That kind of thing. Then in religion, it's not quite efficient. Minister, priest, I have prayed and I've prayed and I've prayed, and my husband still won't quit drinking and running around with 13-year-old girls. I have been trying to live a good life all my life, and I thought, I asked God for one thing, make me fucking rich. And I'm still having to dig ditches. In all areas concerning these governing bodies, and their sub-genres under the ones I've enumerated, but there is the feeling in you individual and in all of humanity that governing bodies, by and large, are inefficient. And everyone could stand up at the ordinary level of consciousness and point out examples of inefficiency, and then say, why can't something be done? Why can't, after all these generations, fathers learn not to pick on their sons? That families, mothers and fathers, learn to just treat their children in a loving manner and not take out their own hang-ups on the children? Why can't religions help people? Why can't religions do good instead of condemning people, make them feel worse? and some of these tales about life after death, when the people talking about it have no idea. Why can't government come out with one program to help these poor people over here and actually take our taxes, since they take them from me anyway, and help the people, instead of giving it to their brother-in-law and all of his relatives to go on a fact-finding expedition to Tahiti for 2 years? Why? Inefficiency everywhere. No system seems to do what it proclaims it was set up to do. I'm getting to the point. Believe it or not. The only efficient, now this is what humanity is being made to see, and the way in which they have been made to behave toward what they think they perceive. That this across-the-board perception of there being a good, the possibility of a good and efficient governing body would require one thing that no one can see or take into account. If it could happen, it would require a minimal degree of apparent freedom. It would almost, if you started a seesaw, and I'm talking about the way things appear. Of course, I'm giving you a description that no one's ever seen. It didn't appear this way, but I'm saying the way it appears once I describe it, it would be as though we had a seesaw here. And if you start wanting efficiency, and I mean that in the full scope, that a system did that which the people thought it should do. That a system, whether it be a family, government, or religion, that this system actually do what it claims that it intends to do. Or in many cases, that it just appears to try to do it. So everything that you can imagine that would be good and positive, I am putting on the word efficiency. The more you had that, the more you would also give up apparent. That if you started loading this down, it'd come off the other side. And by freedom, I mean it in the full, the greatest context, apparent freedom. This is not wired in to ordinary consciousness, but just you should be able to take a quick quantum leap in what I am saying to you verbally. If things were to work efficiently, the way that the letter writers to the paper, the way little voices in your own partnership cried about the waste and the inefficiency and the stupidity of bureaucracy and government and my family, the church, the very things that you could point out, specific examples, that here is somewhere where they went off on a wrong course. They had a good idea and it just fell apart. They ran awry. They stopped, whatever it was. You'll be able to take a quick leap. If there had not been some tolerance there, some real freedom, apparent freedom, of what they were attempting to do and those they were attempting to do it for, those that they had to step on to do it, those they had to take away something from this group to do it another. It was a matter that there was too much freedom going on. You take away the freedom and you get efficiency. Take away all freedom and you get efficiency. It's unquestioned. No question. But then a system will do exactly what it says it will do, and it will do it. Now, I do so assume, I do so hope that you newer people getting this from afar know that I'm not talking about religion and politics and family strife in life. I am talking about the people attempting to do this. Can you see any connection between this and what I started out talking about, of being in a situation of continually pulling your extremes of your behavior, of your feelings, of your yellow circuit mentation, of your physical habits, everything in which you seem to have been wired up to play a part of, to bring these extremes to the point that they become mainstream to you. At such time, there are no longer extremes. Forget anybody's standard, you'll understand it when it happens. It's a bad habit going away, and you don't really think about it until somebody points it out. And you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that, yeah. That sort of thing. But can you see a connection between that and the role of efficiency, of it being a matter of what seems to be a growing amount of efficiency, taking away a growing or a lessening amount of what appears to be freedom? Can anyone see a quick quantum glimpse that is, you got to listen to this fast, that is one of the apparent intrigues of religion, and that is two, one of the reasons that religion fails. It is three, one reason that religion is popular. The partnership says things do not run efficiently. And what the partnership is also saying without knowing it is, where are all the new Hitlers coming from and Mussolinis now that we need them? How come I could never really take up with the Pope and take his word as being it? How come my father seemed to be wishy-washy? How come I can't find somebody to put their little foot down and somebody that knows what's going on? But notice one of the things I pointed about religion, that is part of its interest, as part of its intrigue in all of its forms. Whether it's some would-be mystical teacher, as someone who says, I got it. I got the revised edition of the Old Testament, the New Testament. It has been revealed to me, the inner workings of it, and I know now why it never did work. I got it. I got it. If I ain't got it, and I tell you what it is, anything else that conflicts with it is not it. That is the appearance of efficiency. Religion has always had that kind of built-in in its life, knowing what it's doing. Now remember, this is not any shortcoming of religion. It has none. Of course, for us, it has no long-coming either. That is a part of the built-in genetic PR. It comes with the farm. Your first blush religion, if any of you who are philosophically of mind, if you can recall back that far, before you learn how to play with yourself, once you realize why they're dragging you to the temple or the church or to somewhere, is that somebody has got the answer. Why is it that my mother sometimes whipped me when it was my brother that ate the cake? Ask a 7-year-old kid. What he is asking is, why is there no justice? It's because of inefficiency. If my governing body of the family was efficient, they would know it wasn't me that ate that cake. Or I could say, hey, I didn't eat it. He did. And he said, no, he did. If the parent governing body was efficient, they'd know I was telling the truth. What kind of parents have I got here? And was I secretly born into a howdy-doody family that nobody understands what's going on? I told the truth, and my own mother, my own father couldn't recognize it. Then you hear about religion. You finally figure out why they're taking you there. You think you do, that man standing up there knows what's going on. Until, of course, if you were so discombobulated at an early age, until you tried to go around and talk to the guy personally after the service. And then many people think, oh my God, I hope there is a God, because this clown doesn't know anything. But what you were willing to pay, you had no choice. It was not any kind of conscious or even unconscious decision. But what you would be willing to pay would have been the appearance of freedom. Because the church says on the surface, the religions say, here is efficiency. Because what could be more efficient than the old man himself? This old God outside of this that made it all, he knows everything about it. And if we're going to talk efficiency, now we're talking efficiency. And here is his organization, here in this life. And it tells you exactly what to do. Nobody can do it. Nobody can live by the 10 Commandments. Or if they say they can, then you always got the clinker of, yeah, but can you actually do it in your little heart? Can you do it in your mind? And the person said, well, I'll go work on it some more. The efficiency never comes to pass for most people. That is a feeling of complete satisfaction. But notice what they were prepared to pay in a way that belies even the word theoretically, because I repeat, no one thinks about it. No one does not think about it. It has nothing to do with conscious or unconscious motivations. But they were prepared, the way things are wired up, they were prepared to give up almost complete freedom. Give up all freedom. That is, tell me what to do that will create a most efficient life in me. Give me satisfaction. And you're prepared to give up all apparent freedom. People do not. They say they can't. The churches even help explain it, because life's body knows what it's doing. It does not harm itself in an irreparable fashion. It does not have internal skirmishes to the point that they take it personally. Even the French don't hate the Germans forever. Life's body, inside these kinds of apparent conflicts that come out as apparent conflicts in humanity, life's body does not take it personally in the sense that some ordinary people do, that they can be insulted or feel as though they were insulted by a cousin in 1929 and they still won't speak to the person, or they still won't eat rye bread because of the Kaiser in World War I. Life's internal parts do not take the conflict personally over a long period of time. They do not sustain feelings of retribution, desire for retribution, and hatred. But within what I started to say, life's body, without having any analyzation of it, and without it not coming to any specific fruition yet, speaking for the many of life, humanity is wired up and prepared to, apparently, give up all apparent freedom for apparent efficiency. It just has not reached the point with the many. And those of you taking notes, I might hint to you, do you think it will ever be so? If you do, what are you going to send life as a funeral wreath? But back to the specific level of the individuals. In a sense, doing this outside just the mainstream, the routine stream of religion, politics, and arts, and sciences, and interpersonal relationships, people attempting to do this are attempting to live more efficiently. They're attempting to be more efficiently used by life. But what are you prepared to give up? And what you're prepared to give up without having any notion of it is to give up freedom. And then what the hell happens? I didn't require enough. There are not enough rules. But now let me ask you to try and neuralize a little further up the road, a little further up your own nervous system. What would be the ultimate freedom? You've got to go into another dimension now. The ultimate freedom is to have no choice. But it has to be to have no choice by your own choice. Not to be, if you were so wired up, if it could have happened, that suddenly you walked into X church and you heard the message, heard the music, looked at the trappings and went, wow, this is it, and you turned into an X follower. And were just delighted. All the so-called problems, the things you worried about, went out of your mind. That was the end of it. And you lived almost a saintly, serene life for your remaining years. Since that did not happen, but if such things did happen, if that was a common occurrence, we could say that that person now, absolutely being an unconditional follower and adherent of Religion X, had given up all apparent freedom because the religion X was complex enough, which they all are, that it could take care of your life from the time you woke up in the morning to the time you went to bed at night. So the person has abandoned all apparent freedom. But that simply happened, if such things did happen as a rule. What I'm talking about is something else entirely. You've got to go into another dimension, wherein the kind of real ultimate freedom would be that you have no choice, but it came about through your own choice. It came about through your own effort. That there is no longer any question, unless it's lightning's hitting the ground every 2 seconds and every 2 feet, you don't wake up in the morning and look out and debate whether you're going to get up and run. It's beyond any conversation. You don't have any internal discussion between you and the partnership as to whether you're going to get up and go to class. There's no longer any internal conversation between you and the partnership that you look down at somebody's feet in line at the grocery store and their wallet falls out and you see gobs of money. That there's no discussion as to whether you're going to say, hey, is that yours? No discussion. It's insulting for me to say, for me to have to say there's no discussion, because that already soiled some of it, but I had no other choice. When there is no choice, that is a form of ultimate freedom, but only if it came about through your choice. There is part of the difficulty in attempting to follow this. If I had difficulties, which I'm sorry I don't, but if I had any, the difficulty would be me trying to turn this into some sensible form. Then your problem is attempting to do something with it, attempting to hear it. But as it said in the second book of Horatio, the 3rd chapter, verily, verily, said he, thus be it always and ever, wasn't it, man? I don't have it with me, but it's something like that. That was from the original Albanian, I think. It was translated into Hungarian. It came out as What Else Is New, I think was the first translation. There is a crude, and as you should see, fairly unprofitable awareness of this outside operations at this level of this kind of activity, out in cults and the so-called mystical sides of religion, is that kind of sensation, and I'm sure it's been verbalized, similar to what I just said, that the ultimate freedom would be if you were an actual slave to God, which, if my memory serves me, and I'll make it serve me, is the English translation of Muslim, is slave of God. That would be the ultimate freedom if you were actually doing exactly what Allah wanted. Just day and night, your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior were just what He wanted, as prescribed in His words. And you did that, it'd be a life of real joy, life of ease, no doubts. You just check with a book. Whatever it says, you do. That can be described. Or the times they used to use about adherents becoming the bride of Christ in Christianity. It's like you just turned yourself over to the Christ idea in Christianity and just lived exactly what it said. Damn the torpedoes after that. Being a slave, giving up all apparent freedom to some greater reality. As I said, you should all by now note, by witness to the fact that you're here, that does not prove profitable. It does not prove individually profitable on a large scale. People just do with it as life has them do with it, but people who become involved with this very specifically find it to be unsatisfying, that something is missing. If you make a minister or a rabbi or your parents or somebody else, if you point out to them the shortcomings, some of them may say, yeah, but so what? And what are you going to do? Many of them just seem to be blind to the fact. They just say, you're not doing it right. You hadn't been doing it long enough. You're too young. You're too tall. You're too thin. How about the situation I'm getting at, wherein you could face it within yourself, the situation that the efficiency, the level of efficiency at which I can now operate has rendered me a slave, has given me almost no alternatives. You could then have a question as to what I'm a slave to. Who am I answering to? And that is where this breaks down, because it's then as though almost you're a slave with no master. That's part of the shortcomings on a horizontal level of this, that there apparently is no master. There is no governing body that I've heretofore have forthwith disavowed, attempted to disavow in people's mentation when they first got involved with this, that I was a ordinary form of a governing body, that I was your father, that I was some kind of priest. Just in the ordinary sense, as you all know, I did everything from curse. You see all the little tricks and little sticks I've done. They're getting pretty worn, but with the new people and out some of these periodic public appearances, to try and give some shock into their system that I was not what they expected, and that this is not what people expect. It is not what they dreamed of, because anything they could have dreamed of was zucchini. Could have been zucchini with some, could have had some corn in it, but it was still zucchini. It wasn't this. And those that didn't dream of zucchini dreamed of pumpernickel. So whatever they dreamed of is not it. And the most efficient way, at the time up until now that I've been doing this, is to take those who are firmly entrenched in their dreams, that this must be zucchini. I'll know it because I know about what it'll taste like, is for me to immediately come out and take a zucchini and drop kick it. So that those who really dream of zucchinis can immediately go, ooh, I wish I hadn't come. And I say, we'll take a short break while zucchini lovers leave. And as you notice, usually a fair amount of the audience gets up and leave. Now I say, those of you who have any great interest in corn, you might as well leave too, because it's just a matter of time. How can you be a slave to something if there is no master? How can you be a captive of something as there is no captor? How can you have given up freedom to something and there seems to be nothing devouring your freedom? And you think life is not interesting. Well, let's turn the tape before I start any further. As I promised last time, let me see if you can get anything out of this. You got to get a lot more than I'm going to say, or it won't be worthwhile. Back to the absolute requirement and the absolute, normally unseen, existence of three things going on, three forces, and you can, in the beginning, of course, withdraw any mystical notions, certainly religious notions, but what I've been calling C, D, and E, of there always being three in operation, that there's not a binary situation. It's man's binary sight. It just coincidentally fits with everything looking to be binary. Within this normally unrecognized framework, that which from the simplistic relative view, that is of D apparently being in some way in any situation, at some specific time, from some specific viewpoint, that which seems to be from your time and place viewpoint of something good, something potentially positive, taking place, planned, there seems to be always something in conflict with it. Whether it be dunderheaded bureaucrats, the slowness of the world to take notice, whatever it is, there always seems to be a D for every C. With a real quantum glimpse, can you see that apparently D resides mainly in the world's ghettos? It's the undeveloped neighborhoods, worldwide neighborhoods. It is the underdeveloped areas. It is a different, more ancient time zone. It's where D seems to be most active. Please keep track of me saying seem and appear. And I will have to say, you surely know that I'm not speaking about neighborhoods and I'm not speaking about ghettos. I'm speaking about something else. But even while saying that, please note this. A murder will make front page news in Palm Beach. In the ghetto, it may not even make the paper. Can you see that there is a reality to this, but it has nothing to do with sociological views, and I'm not talking about any psychological or economic situations in the world, because you have got to be able to move your consciousness into a multi-leveled, into a multi-dimensioned universe, and understand that different time zones exist simultaneously with other time zones in humanity and in you. That Palm Beach exists simultaneously in the same locale, in the same time zone with Calcutta, with whatever would be, from a horizontal viewpoint, one of the world's great undeveloped ghettos. Underdeveloped, undernourished, behind the times, less civilized. It exists. Right when you pass the city limits, and this is three-dimensional, which doesn't really cover it, but as soon as you pass the city limits, it says Palm Beach. If you look on the other side, it says ghetto. But more than that, it is like the plates of the earth. Now, I once tried to get you to see as a picturization of the continuing parallel time zones. It is also in layers, that you got a ghetto here, and then you got Palm Beach, then you got a ghetto, then you got Beverly Hills. But it would appear that all of the dastardly, the majority of all the dastardly, harmful activities take place in the world's ghettos, right? That's why I made up the example. How many murders happen in Palm Beach? Well, we don't do that sort of thing. Once every 20 years it does happen, but my God, it takes us 19 years talking about it before we can bear to have another one. Hey, just once a decade, or once every couple of decades it may happen, but and in the world's ghettos, can't even keep track of it. Robberies. People don't get mugged in Palm Beach. And muggings in the ghetto, forget it making the paper. Most people won't even bother to report it. Is it not coincidental that what appears to be D appears to be so widespread, so deep-rooted in undeveloped neighborhoods? Does anyone see any connection between that and the bell curve and the extremes? Can anyone see, talking to you few now, not the world, You don't have to worry. Your concern should not be of getting out and getting into a dangerous neighborhood. It's a dangerous neighborhood getting into you. It is the ghettos in you. It's not a ghetto that you might try and avoid for fear that you would be shot or mugged. Everyone is wired up to carry around a ghetto. That there is an undeveloped neighborhood in you that only you, within the context of the partnership, will venture into. You do not normally recognize it as being a dangerous area. But if you can give a quantum consideration of what I'm saying, you're back to what all the religions, even sociology, psychology, your mother told you all your life, except they kept pointing somewhere else, and it was always two-dimensional. The ghettos of the world, the ghettos within people, can be seen quite literally, as far as words will go, as a Western time zone. That is, one right behind you, one right behind any group of people. That you step into a ghetto and you're stepping into the past, at least the three-dimensional past. When you begin to get some notion of that, you'll begin to have your own notions of why it's incorrect to talk about what I have been lumping under D behavior, D activity, that the world is always referred to as evil, bad. And I keep pointing out to you that you could not exist. Life could not go on without that which human consciousness calls evil and bad. In the ghetto, it's not evil and bad. Those living in the ghetto do not see mugging as being bad. Their attitude will be on the basis that if I don't hit somebody in the head and take their money, I don't eat. And primary on my list of good things to do in the world is to eat. Well, the general category, the general heading of what is good for me is to stay alive. You can find, in a quite real sense, that which ordinary consciousness has always labeled evil, that which ordinary consciousness has always labeled evil, bad, was simply a time zone west of the one from whence cometh the comments and the judgments about good and evil. It is people living in Missouri making continual judgments about people living in Nevada as being evil. And all they are is a time zone behind. Every time you go into the ghetto, that which would seem to be evil is that which is quite respectable, quite acceptable in their time zone. And once you've got some notion of the reality behind my descriptions of time zones, you understand that you've got to have all time zones. In a sense, what life is up to, in the same way of trying to pull the extremes into the mainstream of its bell curve, into the heart of its bell curve, is life is continually trying to take the diverse time zones and to pull them together to where there's only the present time zone. But it's been trying to do that as far back as the Yellow Circuit can remember, which is as far back as the Yellow Circuit's been operating. Life has been attempting to do that. That is still a form of the attempted homogenization. It is attempting to pull everyone into one time zone, make everybody one color, one religion, one general height. I hate to say one sex, because that happens, I don't want to be around. Just personal comment, we all have our hobbies. That's known as comic relief. Ha ha. I could go on for a long time about D apparently thriving in life's ghettos, but you should be able to take something from that. and something from the fact that that which always appears to be evil, unprofitable behavior, uncivilized behavior, is always non-evil, quite acceptable and civilized if you step back one time zone. If you step over the line, wherever it hits in the United States from, taking a guess, from Kansas into Colorado, all you got to do is get to the border and step over into the ghetto, and that which you brought there, of your feelings about that which is proper, that which is decent, that which we should be doing, you take one step over into that other time zone, and you might as well turn it upside down. Any notion you have of good and evil can easily be turned upside down if you could accommodate yourself to the changed environment instead of taking yourself there with it. Then you could face the questions I wasn't going into specifically of what could be done with this. Well, at least you think I can't preach a sermon at all. I'll leave you one thing, is stay out of the damn ghetto. All right, I'll leave you 1.5 things. Wherever you're living now eventually becomes a ghetto because you grew up there and you're just used to that environment. But after a certain serious time in my finishing school, you should begin to look around and to see that all that antique furniture is junk. You should see that what all the kids have been calling pets are rats and roaches. You should begin to see that the old homestead is indeed a ghetto, and you've got to go into another time zone. Of course, then I can also suggest that eventually the sheen wears off even Disneyland, and you've got to keep moving the time zones. Wherever you were born was a ghetto. Wherever you were born was an undeveloped neighborhood. Should be obvious. You did everything that was, or let's say you did, because you said you did, that you tried to do everything that your neighborhood said was proper. Or if you didn't try it, at least you looked around at other people trying it, and it still didn't work. But everything in your neighborhood that was promised that, hey, this could almost be utopia. We almost have a Shangri-La neighborhood if we'd all pull together. It could be worse. Look over there in the 4th Ward. Look across the street there, over in the other neighborhood. At least we're not that bad off. There was somebody, given the nature of the way life is, there was somebody just to your left, another neighborhood, that there were some kids looking over at you going, ooh, El Crudo. Boy, don't ever go over there. Those people are hardly fit to allow your pigs to play with. But all the time zones are necessary for the many. But for the few, you've got to see that you are constantly finding yourself in a newly revealed sense of a ghetto. That which for a while I thought I'd made great progress in my feelings and my attitude toward people. And I'm not near as prejudiced or bigoted. I'm not as closed-minded as I was when I started this. I'm pretty good. A lot of progress. I'm not here to make you feel guilty or give you the blues. But for a certain period of time, you've got to see that that is not true. You simply shifted. You have moved from one ghetto into another. That which for a while you thought perhaps was quite profitable or at least acceptable behavior, thinking, and feeling. But you got that neighborhood and moved to the east a little bit, and you can see that from your viewpoint now, of what you understand now, what I was doing might as well have been labeled D, because it was destructive from my view now, from where I am living now. And yet, The cards and letters from radio and TV land continue to pour in asking me, all right, yeah, I hear all that. Now what? Only those asked, now what, that don't know now what. And you people in radio and TV land, quit sending me those dumb cards and letters saying, now what? Especially those that don't have any folding money in them. Thought I was a TV minister there for a second. Got overheated. The best TV minister I ever heard was one that said, listen, I try to intercede with the gods and help you people and pray over your problems and try to help you, but I don't respond to requests that come on postcards. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? The man wasn't no postcard evangelist. He wasn't no postcard preacher. He said he didn't fool with no postcards. If you're going to send your problems on a postcard, save your money, he ain't going to look at it. It's got to come in a letter. You know what I mean? A letter that will hold something besides your damn phony baloney note. Back to the real universe. I think I'm going to end it with something. Again, you people just getting this for the first time at some distance, whether it be time and place. I'm going to start off, and it'll sound like I'm actually talking about something out here in the world, but I'm not. It happens in the world. It is a gross exaggeration working at such a speed you can't see it. It is a reflection of what you can find in you individually, you can find in small pockets of people collectively, and then you can see is all of humanity, and eventually you see that this is all the life of life. This is all a continual positive expansion of life's own life. As I continue to hint and to say, and many of you should have some notion of this by now yourself, whether you could explain it or not, it's not important. This kind of activity is bound by the same kind of absolute laws and demands that everything else in life's body is, more or less, in certain areas. And one of them is atrophy will take over. Things become stagnant. As that great priest of Ford and then Chrysler said, and even General Motors, it's grow or die. It's true with this. I seem to be able to operate it at a minimal concurrence, as if that was necessary, with this demand. But many of you should suspect, after what you've been through, or some of you newer people, that such as this has to some degree, keep expanding a little. Not to make me famous, but that the whole thing must expand, or else, those of you that are really getting some notion of this, if it's not expanding, then life is no longer using it. It's not necessary. It just goes away. Right now, it's not going away, this particular activity. But something has to continually be done, whether it's me telling people in other cities or here where we're meeting, is we got to get out and do something. Start handing out handbills, get us on cable TV, start putting on public meetings. You people come up and write some skits, do something to attract some new people. Remember, I'm still not talking about what it sounds like I'm talking about, although it's true with what I'm talking about. The times that I have had you people do such as this, and I've even given tasks for you to try and neuralize such things as what purpose does religion apparently serve? What vacuum, what need does religion apparently fulfill in humanity? There are times in the past I've said, if I placed you in charge of this and said it must be made more public and something must be done, and I put you in charge, what would you do? I just told you to do it, and I walked away from it and said I'll be back in 2 months. You do it. Those kinds of questions. And it normally creates a certain amount of interest. And you people speculating from the time zone in which you were at the time as to what might be done, and all of its ramifications, all of its possibilities. Many of you, the first few moments, minutes, hours you were exposed to this and listened to me, you thought, boy, this is it. That's what I've been looking for. Then some of you thought, boy, I wish I could tell some of my friends. I'm going to call somebody in other states. I know that they'll be interested in this, and they'll be down here in a jiffy as soon as I tell them. Or why does this seem to be operating on such a small level? Things I've already heard, and then things that they connected with me, not just because you said it, but they're connected to me, and suddenly I realized some of this is so patently obvious that if we just told large numbers of people, they would all suddenly go, oh my God, I should have seen that. Thanks a lot for telling me. And it is not quite that simplistic. Not quite indeed. That's beyond comic relief, isn't it? Let me tell you about efficiency. And let me give you an example of efficiency. Now, if I said right now, which I'm always saying to some degree, but if I specifically said we have got to start, what more years I got left, we got to start right now when some of you people can really get an expanded use of the information and the energy life is making available along these lines, so that, you know, when I go to that great mystical corral in the sky, you know, assuming life still has some interest and is still serving some purpose with this, it won't be like I just dropped through a trap door and everybody's standing around wondering, now what do we do? If I said that we had to start doing things more publicly, we're really going to start doing something, you people going, I'll leave it to you to think of a new name, you know, what will we call me, what's going to be the attitude, or should we just drop a central figure out of it and just make this open up to all possibilities? How could we start making this information more palatable, more immediately available to a general audience? Not people who believe they're just limited or interested only in mystical things. Presented as being an artistic endeavor, as a new scientific breakthrough, psychology taken to a new level. Anything, if I opened it up to you, which in a sense I said I've done, but I invite you now, I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds, everybody think what could be done, or how would I go about this, what would be the most efficient way. Some of this is so meaningful, just some little parts that you can think of that I have pointed out that you finally begin to see for yourself, just a few little things. If we just put these on little cards and hand them out at intersections of people, not sell flowers, don't take any money, just say, here, just take this, and you walk away and they look at it, they go, ah! As many of you know, it don't work quite that way. But I want to wrap up, in a sense, if I can drag you along without turning it into peanut butter and the obvious, some of what I've been talking about, and efficiency. When you have notions about how much I may seem to know, how much you seem to have gotten from this personally, it's beyond any form of hero worship, beyond any form of hypnosis or drugs. Imagination is just things that you now see that you wish your mother and father could see, that your best friends could see. Are there moments of magnanimity? On a good day, you look out your window and take in a breath of fresh air and think, boy, I wish everybody knew this. If they just knew these one or two things, if they just knew this one thing, God, it'd be like they lost 200 or 300 pounds. It would seem so easy. You can just get out and tell people. And give them a good preface that, wait a minute, we're not trying to convert you to anything, and this is not really religious, and there's no kind of secrets, we don't even worship anybody. Just listen to me right quick. Most of you should know now that you just give that preface to people, and they immediately begin to go, And you say, no, 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 I don't want anything from you. No, nothing to be afraid of. And you don't even have to thank me. When I tell it to you, you don't have to thank me or anything. And they really begin to... Because that is not the way life is wired up in the main. I was going to tell you about efficiency. Out of all of the strange things that life has tried, you know what probably the most efficient verbal thing life has ever said through man in this area? As much as some of you think I picked on the poor old Christian church. Using religion as being that kind of would-be governing body, the area in times past, and still it's used, there's overlapping time zones, it's still being used to some effect, that life is talking about its own bell curve, its own attempted expansion to bring its own extremes in to the heart of its mainstream, that it's still using religion. As I said, originally you could look at religion as being the prime system, the prime structure in life's body that it used to have this energy transformed, transmitted. Religion was the vehicle. Out of all the religions, out of all the descriptions that would-be mystics and the so-called prophets, the parts of life's body that spoke of such matters, out of all the major religions, all the minor religions, but let's stick with the majors since they have the most effect, and we're talking about having a greater effect on a greater number of people. I must compliment life, if it needs my compliment. In the area of so-called Christianity, it created a masterstroke. It created a slogan that I don't know how I could ever improve upon. Perhaps I'm being a little dramatic. I don't know how. It was a masterstroke that all the religions throughout the ages, the would-be mystical systems that had the various appearances of promised efficiency, weighted by, whether it was recognized or not, at least the tacit anticipation of abandonment of your apparent freedoms on the other side. The lengthy tomes, the collected writings of Buddha, all the Old Testament stories, the Jewish fairy tales, Muhammad, the page after page after page that he says that they're given to him, governing everything from usury, sexual habits, the rights of the citizens in a political system, all of that. You get down to a certain point, and in Christianity life, up until now, and like I said, I'm still giving it my seal of absolute approval. There's nothing to top it right now. It came down with the masterstroke. And I'm bringing all this up, of course, to get you to try and look at something else. It got it down to 2 words. Not 3,000 pages of the Quran. Not book after book of begotten and begotten in the Old Testament. Not people fighting, communities having fights over. Buddha didn't actually say that. And they got stuff strewn out throughout half the world. And people saying, did Buddha actually say that, or was that somebody that heard him one time? Or how old is that piece of paper? You know when Buddha died, don't you? He didn't. In fact, he couldn't even write Chinese. Don't try to sell that. 2 words life got down to. And I would suggest to you, you newer people, is not that one thing causes another, but this is the sort of thing that you ought to be able to start putting together and then go off at a right angle into another dimension, literally. It's not that this caused it, but notice, coincidentally, Christianity is the world's religion. I assume all of you know that. Or go pick up, was the Harvard or Princeton, somebody had worked for years. There's a big old fat book out that they have been trying to bring a survey of the world's religions. At any rate, I'm not here to quote them to you. But Christianity, I assume all of you know. Christianity is it. I mean, that's number one. They are Hertz and Avis. Number two is way down. And number three is way down. Number four, you wouldn't even believe it. Efficient. And it got down to two words: Jesus saves. Walter Thompson, whoever's the hottest ad agency on this planet, should eat their hearts out. I mean, they should take their hearts and their brains and just send them out for lunch or to be dry cleaned. Jesus saves. It is the height of efficiency verbally, two words. I have spent great amounts of time, I'm sure 5 to 10 seconds, which was sufficient, trying to get it down to one word. You can get it to 3 easily, and then you can get it to 300 pages, then you can get it to 300 aphorisms, then you can get it to 3,000 pages of commentary. But you can't get to one word. You can get it to 2. Jesus saves. Of course, everyone understands this really got nothing to do with religion, because it could have gotten out and come down to God saves if things had been different in a different time zone. But here you've got the story of somebody connected with the supreme force, whereas the fundamental Christians believe he was actually the Son of God. In some way, God told one of his sons, go down there and help those people and just get yourself born like an ordinary person. And so now it's down to there are ways you should behave and etc. But the bottom line is this: Jesus saves. And the bottom line is, although I know that some of the small parts of the Christian part of life's body would quibble over some of this, but still the general thing, follow what I'm saying, since we're not actually talking about religion anyway, when I get to where I'm going, that Jesus saves, that no matter whether you can live by the 10 Commandments, whether you can do everything he did, all you got to do is believe that Jesus saves, and that's it. That's it. They got various forms. You sign a card saying, I've joined this church, which is tantamount to saying Jesus saves, or you stand up and say, I believe that Jesus is the head guy. I believe that he was it. And they say you're saved because Jesus saved. That's all it takes. I surely trust that none of you see this as being simplistic. And all of you people have understanding that reaches to the complex part, almost to the edge of objective instability, which is the foundation of this world. That the enriched, the heightened complexity is simplicity. What, among other things, this thing that I'm doing, that I'm responsible for, what, among other things, is it not? Besides a greenhouse or an aircraft carrier. It is not simplistic, not on the surface. Here it is, we've got several years of tapes, audio, and now we're working on 2 years of videotapes, 1 a week. An hour and a half, 2 hours of me spontaneously conveying something, at least talking. And it all seems to be, to those that can hear parts of it, surprisingly at times, sometimes after the fact, that it seems to interlock. Wait, this ties in with something that must have been 6 months ago. But wait, he's talking about the same thing, he just changed it, and I begin to see something. On the surface, it is not simplistic. It is not Elmer saves. It is not Jesus saves. It is not, hey, I save. It is not this thing saves. See, this thing saves, that's already. Is it not coincidental that Christianity is the Hertz of religion? It is General Motors of religion. It's a runaway. Number 2 is hardly worth, numerically, counting. And you can describe Christianity as Elmer, Jesus saves. There is built in to everyone. It is at the very heart of life's mainstream that there has got to be a simple, efficient way to satisfy this itch of being alive. And if you don't do it, you and the partnership feel as though, well, the potential is here. The knowledge is here. The way to do it's here. I can't do it. I evidently don't want it bad enough, or I'm too weak. I wasn't raised and instilled enough with willpower. But Jesus saves. It is as much in your genes as the DNA itself. The clarion cry that attracts the most attention, that life uses in the most efficient way in the mainstream, comes down to that which is simplistic on the surface. Jesus saves. Beginning and the end of the subject. You want to live a better life? Jesus saves. You want to be over your bad habits? Jesus saves. Are you really just almost neurotic over worrying about death, illness? Jesus saves. And there are those around, always have been, that will say, yes, that's true. Nobody's paying me, but I'll stand up and tell you, I was a drunk. I was heavy into drugs. My marriage was ruined. I couldn't keep a job. I was just absolutely miserable. I kept thinking that drugs were making me happier, would help tomorrow. When I realized that Jesus saves, I'm a new person. I don't take drugs. I don't drink. Thanks be to Jesus. Trust in Him. My marriage is back together. I'm there with my kids. I'm trying to raise them properly. And it's based on one thing: Jesus saves. What can be done with this information? What can you do with it? Remember, we're not talking about starting a religion, even though I could apparently be talking about doing this more publicly. But the idea is that everyone entertains. It's almost impossible to rid yourself. I'm not telling you to rid yourself, but they're there all the time. If I give the least hint, and many times on your own, you have the feeling of, we should be doing more than just a group of us, these few groups around the country, meeting, watching these tapes. And this is quite true from a very real view, that everything that life believes it wants to know, I've already said. I've already covered it all 2 or 3 times. Made it a triple-decker. Put a toothpick through it. Hold it together. That everything that world scientists, leaders of all religions are scratching their heads about, praying, fasting, debating, I know it and I've already told you. In 4 or 5 different ways. Told you in jokes, humorous ways, point blank, then seem to back up and ask you rhetorically and then suggest. But it still ain't Jesus saves. And that which does not fit in, that which cannot come close to matching Jesus saves, Elmer saves, Larry saves, Martha saves. When you get past that, since this is already into the mainstream of life, when you get past that, you're asking for trouble. You've already lost part of your audience. As soon as you say, we have the new religion, if we were going to do that, it can be summed up in 3. Count them, believe it. Just only 3 words. A large number of people go, hey, give me a break, and they'd leave. Because we already got Jesus saves. Life has already affected a large, the majority of its human molecular system, whether they actually are card-carrying Presbyterians or Baptists or whatever. But it has already been infiltrated into their genes, over half of its own body, that Jesus saves. 2 words. And you're going to come along and say, hey, we got the new improved version. Money back guarantee, new lemon scent, will not scratch or harm your ceramic tiles. New and improved, and it's only 3 words. A whole lot of people are going to check their watches and split. The new and improvement, I won't say it'd have to be 1 word, but it'd have to be 2 that's just as agreeable. I guess you could get down, Jesus saves with 3 syllables. Maybe you get down to 2 syllables in 2 words. But again, I remind you, this really has nothing to do with simple linguistics. But it has taken that which is already a part of life's own system, the desire, the need for greater efficiency, which equals growth. The greater efficiency being at the apparent expense of apparent freedom, and the cost, the explanation, is down to 2 words. It's the opening chapter, the ending verse. 2 words. What does life do with such as this? Why did life, in a sense, tell me all of this? Why did life at least bring up, that took no great effort on my part, to attract you few people here and in other places that apparently hear something behind this binary insanity? I might say through my noble attempt to restore some semblance of a state of insanity. Somebody write that down as a topic for a later sermon. Why has life done this when I have in no wise shown any inclination to come up with Jesus saves? The kinds of way in which I suggest that you could use this, by at least neuralizing it, is how delightful it is that life does such things. How coincidental it is that a religion that can be brought into a governing body, that can be summed up into 2 words, coincidentally seems to have way over half the world's people following it. Or turn around the other way. The majority of life's molecules seem to have come up with a religion, seem to come up with the notion of a governing body, seem to have come up with the idea of a more efficient system or systems. And they got it down to 2 words. Is that not interesting? Is that not coincidental? Then you could ask, how did you get involved with this? Where do you fit? Where does this fit? If indeed I have got to see that this continues to grow, how in the hell do I fit into it? As complex as I have seemed to have presented it, as complex as many of you see it now, that everywhere you seem to turn is another aspect of this, another small wheel and another wheel. One little gear strikes something over here and it reminds you of something 10 years ago. It reminds you of something in a past ghetto in which you lived. And then you see it's all connected. It's connected in such an astounding way, there's really nothing to say. You almost forget about it. It's become the beginning of a new ghetto. But at the time, it's astounding. You've seen things that the popes, all the popes that ever lived, if you melted them down and put their brains together, none of them had ever seen this one thing that you saw. Now you're a receptionist on a beet farm. And you see it and you realize, this is amazing. It's another piece of inefficiency now gone from me. It's another burden, another piece of garbage I was carrying around. It just disappeared, and there's really no reason why. I've got less options left to be dumb. I've got less options left to be an unthinking part of life's nervous system. So, but how come the most efficient, apparently, in the mainstream can be brought down to Jesus saves? Kind of makes you wonder, don't it? I'm asking you that rhetorically, you people from out of town. It don't make me wonder. So you new people don't write me a note, offer me a suggestion, or perhaps something I overlooked. That concludes this evening's festivities. Task. I got a new bombs away for you. Fill in the blank. Those who can. Those who can't, fill it in anyway. But just don't actually fill it in. Don't write it in. Don't actually use letters. Or if you do, don't use anything that's either indelible or delible. The bombs away is as follows. Interference. Don't write this. By this, I'm talking about like static. You'll get the rest of it. Interference is to a morbidly fascinating radio show interference, or you can write interference / static, or parentheses static, or, those of you who know anything about it, interharmonic distortion, non-repressed AM interference. Anyway, interference / static is to a morbidly fascinating radio show as blank is to ordinary yellow circuit mentation. And I have a second one. I was going to say something tonight. I had as far as my rough mental plans go, to say something to you about the need for everyone to be a poet, and I didn't get around to it. I'm going ahead and give you the task, which may save me from going back and doing it, or it may not. The task is, I want you every day for the next 2 weeks, 3 times a day, to write a poem in your head. It can be a limerick, if you're so inclined, and something of a, I'd suggest, a religious nature, like there was an old man from Tucker. Well, that sort of thing. Or just a good old, like, a 4-line, just an improvisational, spontaneous. Like you ought to try one every morning when you wake up. In the mornings can be a pain as you try to start your brain. Now be one of them for the day. Then try one about midday. I want you to try this as much as possible, like first thing when you awake. And then one in the midday, and then one late at night. But do 3, spread them out generally like that. If you do any more during the day, that's on your own free time. It's none of my business, I don't care. But I want 3 specifically done each day for 2 weeks. Don't write these mothers down. Do them all in your head. And the good ones, you can remember if you want.